Welcome back to the Super Low Slabs podcast. I am solo today without Emily. So I am Sarah, one half of the Carwells, and today we have a John on. Welcome, John.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you for being willing to come on. Before we kind of get started and dig in, why don't you give everyone an elevator pitch of kind of your background in real estate and where you plug in?
Yeah, so like you said, my name is Jon Schoeller. I've been in real estate for going on 6 years now. My partners and I have a business here in Charleston, West Virginia, where we have now flipped close to 200 homes over the last 5.5 years. We're just newly getting into the Airbnb game. My wife and I own some personal property as well that we're trying to convert to Airbnb. I'm also a private money lender. It's probably my favorite way to invest. It's the most passive way I've found to date. All the other ways that people tell you is passive. It's not as passive as they make it seem to be on Instagram. But anyway, I'll talk more about that on the podcast. And yeah, and also have a YouTube channel, Jon Schoeller, and about to hit 50,000 subscribers on there.
Woohoo! See, you started on the right platform. We started on TikTok, and it's a little bit harder to monetize than YouTube is. So we
Right.
could we could take a lesson from your book. Well, it sounds like you've got a ton of experience. I cannot wait to be there. I feel like everyone starts dabbling in one portion of real estate or another, and it just kind of grows from there. It's like shiny new object syndrome when you're at the beginning, where you're like
Yeah,
everything
the
sounds
grass is,
interesting.
the grass is always greener. I think you had Mike and Jill Elefante, or you,
Hmm.
you know them, and how much they're making in cash flow. And it's like, man, should I even be flipping houses or should I just be doing Airbnb? But
Right.
it's easy to chase the shiny object and to I always tell people stick to what you're good at, stick to what you're interested in. Just because something makes money doesn't mean you'll enjoy it, so just keep that in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Isn't that the truth too? It's like anything that you get into, there's going to be stressors and difficulties along the way, and if you don't enjoy what you're doing from the get-go, it's just going to be pulling teeth the whole time.
Right.
Absolutely. Okay, well, I've got a few questions for you today since I have you here and I get to pick your brain. So, first question that I've got for you, because you dabble in so many different areas of real estate, and I love talking to people that do that because they've got such good perspective overall. Where do you most often rinse and repeat in your real estate game?
So it's in our market. It's where I'm located. So I'm in Charleston, West Virginia, and we probably do like a 30-mile radius. So we just have a good name for ourselves here. Again, we built that over the last 6 7 years, and uh, we don't have to advertise anymore, and we love
Hmm.
that. So we haven't spent any money on marketing to find our deals in 5 years, and a lot of people like hate us for that because that's where a lot of people's budget goes. But people, when they think of selling their houses, when they think of like auction houses, or when they think of like distressed properties, they think of us, and so they send us all the deals.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mostly fix and flip, or what do you do with those houses typically?
Yeah, about 90% are fix and flip. We do some wholesaling. We hold some for rentals. The partners, it's me, Steve, and Andrew. Sometimes we'll buy a property out of the company to hold for our personal portfolio. And that's what my wife and I are looking to do now and turn some into Airbnb, which actually how I found your Instagram.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Airbnb is definitely having a moment, isn't it?
Yeah, to say the least. It's like the Bitcoin of the real estate market right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like for me personally, I got into it almost so naively. Like just I had no mentor, I had no one that was pushing me into it. I hadn't like latched onto any sort of an Airbnb guru, and I feel like that's why I fell flat on my face over and over again. I had like just a small glimpse of like what it could be, thinking it was simple, and it just isn't the case. Well, that's amazing. And it definitely, I mean, not needing to spend any money on marketing is super impressive. That means that you've done your job.
Yeah, so we built a good name for ourselves, and reputation's everything in this game, and so we try to pride ourselves on that.
Yeah. So with your now Airbnb properties that you're looking to pursue, are all of them in Charleston as well?
So yeah, the one that my wife and I were just put it in contract. It's a small condo. It's near the state capitol building where a lot of like senators and stuff come in, and it's also about a mile and a half in each direction from two separate hospitals. So we're thinking about Airbnb the for like short-term rentals for like nurses and delegates and stuff like that. The condo
Mhm.
has a little bit of a stipulation where it's not supposed to be anything less than 3 months. Now
Mhm.
you will find them all over Airbnb going around the HOA rules. So we haven't decided if we're going to play that game or not, or just want to play by the rules and just do the 3 month thing. But either way, it should at least, if we can only do the 3 months, we should make about 33% more rental revenue than otherwise. And if we do decide to do Airbnb or the building loosens its rules, then we predicted that we could probably double our standard rental income. So that'll be
Yeah.
good cash flow in that unit.
Yeah, absolutely. And you make a good point. I mean, especially because of COVID and especially because of the work from home culture, now it's so much easier to find tenants that are midterm, right? That are 1 to 3 months that will be great tenants and are looking for a furnished rental. And with like this, great resignation where all of a sudden everyone's like leaving their jobs and starting their side hustles. It's like I know so many people now that are full-time living in Airbnbs. And so people will get so nervous about those HOA rules, and we get questions on them all the time. And we're like, look, at a very minimum, you're still going to turn a higher profit, even if it does mean you have to find tenants that are 1, 3, 6 months.
Yeah. So that's one that we're purchasing. Then we have a 4 unit. My wife and I own that. We might convert one or two of the units there because, again, it's close to the hospital. But what we're really looking for, I've been talking with Mike about this and following y'all's stuff. We're really looking to purchase like a mid to higher end unit somewhere where we would like to travel as well, and possibly partner with somebody that has more Airbnb experience and more time to manage. My wife and I, we're extremely busy as is.
Hmm.
My wife's a nurse anesthetist. She's dropping down to part time because we have another YouTube channel with her that's about to hit 100,000 subscribers, and that's really taken off for us. So we're trying to focus on that. But with everything that we got going on, our rentals and our business and YouTube, and we have a toddler that's 3.5 years old, and we love to travel, so we're extremely busy. We want to get into the Airbnb game, and we think the best of both worlds is buying a house that you would like to use sometimes.
Hmm.
So maybe that's in a destination where otherwise you wouldn't buy because it's too expensive, but the Airbnb game will help you offset that expense. The trick to that is finding a partner. It seems to be the trick is finding a partner that's okay with giving up some of the months or weeks to the owners, uh, and then also finding somebody in a market that we want to be in close to a beach.
Yeah, definitely. I was just going to mention that trying to find a partner who also is on board to utilize it for a vacation home can be super complicated because so far all of the conversations that I've had because we're doing the same thing. Like our Airbnb growth will likely be a little messier and a little slower growth than everyone else because I don't think that we're going to stick in one market, right? Like if you stick in one market, you can rinse and repeat a lot quicker because there's a lot less learning curve on the front end, a lot less research on the front end, a lot less mistakes on the back end. Just the familiarity really plays a factor. But for us, it's like, there's that lifestyle component that's like, okay, we could build a gazillion properties here and just travel elsewhere, or we could, kind of be selfish about it and pick out properties that we like, that we want to enjoy ourselves as well, and maybe have a little bit of a slower growth, but have it be very, very focused on who we are as individuals instead of just investors. But so far, everyone I've talked to that has partners, they're like, no. Like we set that precedent at the beginning where it's like this is a business, this is not a vacation home. Like if we're going to go into it, it's for money. It cannot be, for anything else. And so it's interesting that, you're making that point that it is super difficult to find someone who kind of aligns in that way.
Yeah, like I feel like, what are you doing it for? Like, what do you? I always tell people, don't get so caught up in the business and the work and the hustle grind life, and don't forget what you're doing all that stuff for. I always like to. I'm not a huge advocate of the hustle grind thing, the whole the world, the hustle grind world. Now I used to be in my 20s, I was, and I think there's a time for it at the beginning of your business or when you're just getting started. Absolutely, you're going to have to hustle, you're going to have to grind, but don't forget what the purpose of starting and doing that was for me. And for me and my wife, it was to have as much time together as possible, and of course with our daughter now, and to travel the world. That's why we put in all the time and effort up front. So not everything's about the dollar for us anymore. Yes, we want it to make cash flow. We want it to be sustainable, so we don't have to worry about it. But we want an added perk to it. Like if it's just
Mhm.
going to make money, that's fine, but that doesn't interest us as much anymore. But if you tell me, we can do an Airbnb in Bali and it completely pay for itself, and we can go there a month out of the year, now I'm more intrigued. That sounds way more fun to me. And so that's kind of how we look at investments going forward.
Oh, that's music to my ears. I am in my 20s still, and so I feel like I'm surrounded by people who are my age who are in that grind phase, which there is a portion of that that's necessary, right? But for us, me and my husband, for him, he's in insurance and we grew his insurance brokerage before we ever started an Airbnb. Like for us, the idea was he was so determined. He was like, Sarah, I'm going to retire you in June of 2021. You're going to be retired. You're not going to have to work. And I am like, there's nothing that sounds worse in my life than that, not working. Like, I need something to do. That wasn't attractive to me. And so I was like, look, I want to make the money that we're earning in insurance grow. Like, let's have a shift where all of a sudden I'm not trading, 40 hours a week for $50,000 a year. Let's see if I can take the money that we're earning over here and make it grow and make our lifestyle better. And so, with this house in Michigan, I mean, we went into Airbnb with that mindset where we were going to be selfish about it and we were going to make sure that we were putting memories before money, assuming that money was taken care of and bills are paid and, we're
Right.
healthy there. And so like with this lake house, for example, we finished it and I didn't, look at the air DNA projections all the way through the year as a whole. I really like that transaction happened so fast. We had to like tour the house and put an offer in and we closed on it all, or we had an offer accepted all in like a 6 hour span. And I was like, we're living in this house in July. And so this year we're
Oh my.
shutting we're shutting it down for the month of July and it would be our most profitable month, but for us it's like, I've dreamed of having a lake house for my entire life in Michigan. Like that's where all of my favorite memories were as a kid. And so we're like, it's not worth the money. I want the memories so much more than I want the money and we don't need any extra. That boat is handled. So sometimes I'll look at it and I'll be like, look at the projections on Price Labs of what I would make in July, and I'm like, man, that would be a thick month. I would enjoy that. And then I'm like, nope, nope, that's
Well,
not
see
the
what I would
point.
do, and maybe you do this, but what I would do is say, okay, I'll calculate that up, whatever it is for the month, and let's say it was like $15,000 in income for that month. It could be even higher, but I'm just going to use a number. Let's say it's 15,000. How I would look at it is, hey, babe, we get a $15,000 Airbnb for free this month. Like, and gift it back to ourselves because that's essentially you didn't have to pay for it, right? Yeah, you kind of lost the money, but I don't look at it that way. I look at it
Right.
as you get to stay there. You're not losing money because you would have had to pay to stay somewhere. You'd have to
Right.
pay to stay somewhere. Maybe you would have stayed somewhere cheaper, but whatever. It's $15,000 free vacation or free stay for you is how I would look at it, and it's still paid for itself the rest of the year. So that's a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I'm like, you know what? I understand why it's the most profitable month of the year because it is the best month in Michigan by far, but I don't want to miss it. So so we're
Right,
doing
right.
it. We're
Yeah,
doing
you don't
it.
want to go to Michigan in December, right?
I know. I'm like, I moved to Texas as quickly as I possibly could after college because I hated the winter so much. So we
Right.
redid that house in the winter and it was just like PTSD. I'm like, oh, this is why I left. So, next question I have for you is why did you pick real estate to kind of sink your teeth in instead of other avenues for investing?
Yeah, well, probably like everybody else. When I was 2021, I started a moving company and I ran that for about 8 years and ended up selling it. And then like you, I thought I could retire. Well, you knew right away you couldn't. I thought I could. I was over moving. I was done with it. And my wife was going to be a travel nurse, and I was just going to travel around with her. We had no kids at the time, and I was going to live on beaches and hang out and have fun. That doesn't go like that. I got miserable pretty quick. So I started researching what can we do with this money that we have, and how can we make it grow, and how can I get my brain working again? Because that was the most important thing. And as soon as you Google, like if anybody's ever Googled, um, you know, how do most people get wealthy? How do most people build passive income? One thing pops up every time it's real estate. Okay. It's
Mhm.
always going to be real estate at the top of that. And so I started watching Bigger Pockets. I started watching all their YouTubes, listening to their podcasts. I started reading real estate books. And naturally, I fell in love with it. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I love to buy things for cheap and sell them for more." I was already doing that with mattresses. I had my own mattress store. I was buying and selling street bikes. So I was already doing this on a minor scale. Why couldn't I do it on a bigger scale? So we traveled nurse for a couple of years. That was great, but I did get bored. And then my wife went back to school to be a nurse anesthetist, and she got accepted here at Marshall University in Charleston. When we found out she got accepted, I immediately started looking up people in the area that were doing real estate, and I
Hmm.
met with them immediately. And long story short, it's really weird. One of the people I met with was Andrew, and then Steve later on, and we kicked it off right away. It was just a weird partnership and how it came. They had already been running the business for 2 years, but they needed somebody with my expertise in my field, which was money and business. And I fit like a puzzle piece. And they had everything that I needed. They had the experience and knew how to find deals. So 5 years now later, we've been partners for 5 years, and it's crazy how that worked out. But that's why I picked real estate, because it seemed like I don't want to say the easiest. It's not the easiest, but the most consistent, the most suggested way by wealthy people to become wealthy. And so I went with that one because I'm pretty conservative with my money anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And you make an interesting point there too about how you think that, retirement early is going to be so amazing and then you experience it for a while and at first it is fun, right? It's like, "Oh my gosh, I have all this free time. I don't have to be anywhere. I don't have to do anything." And then everyone that I've talked to, they're like, "Yeah, you just hit this brick wall." And you're like, "Not yet. Like this isn't it. Like now I have to go find something that I'm actually passionate about building because that's where, your purpose is fulfilled as opposed to just like floating, you know?"
I remember when it hit me. We got our first assignment, travel assignment, was in LA, and it was downtown LA, and we had a rooftop pool and a rooftop hot tub, and I was ready. Like I had been moving also. I finally just sold the company, and I was kind of helping still, and I was done with it. I sold the truck, we sold everything, we got in our SUV and headed out to California. And we had our little Jack Russell. We checked into a new place. It was a new city. Everything was amazing. In about 2 or 3 days, she went off to go to work for her first day. So she was working 12-hour shifts. So she went for 12 hours, and I grabbed a little bit. I wasn't a drinker then, but it was just the scene. So I grabbed a beer. I think I had a beer, and I went up to the rooftop pool. I kicked my flip flops up, put my feet up. I had a view of the whole city, and I was sitting there, and I took a couple snap. I think at the time I was on Snapchat. Even that's how old that was for me. Took a couple Snapchat photos, and then it was like 15 minutes went by, and I was like, now what? Okay, well, okay, this is great, but now my mind's going crazy, and I'm getting up. I'm wandering around the pool. I went to the hot tub. I went back to the pool. My wife's not there. I don't have anybody to talk to, and I was like, oh boy. So I did, but I did enjoy it. I probably had a great time for the first 3 to 6 months. We traveled to different places, but one of our last assignments was Maui, Hawaii, and I knew something was wrong when I was sitting on the beach. We had an oceanfront condo in Maui, and I was sitting on the beach depressed. And
Yeah.
I knew then. I was like, oh, it's not the environment, it's not the weather, it's not the money. We had money. It's not any of that. It's that you need purpose. You need something to work on and something to do. And I had to get back to that as soon as possible. I was at a probably a low point in my life, honestly. And I had what most people would call had it all. So for those listening, that's a word of what is it? A cautionary tale is what I would
Yeah.
call that.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely felt that same way. I mean, the idea of being retired at, 26 years old, I'm like, "No." No, like, my brain cannot have that much free time with nothing productive to do. Like, no that's n
Right.
nothing good is gonna come from that spot. So I was like, "Nope, we need a different trajectory here, definitely." Another interesting point that you made was, having partners. Like when Emily and I first started and we decided to go into business together, I mean, we're best friends. So we've been partners in so many different facets before we started this. And so it was kind of an easy transition into this. But we had so many people that were like, another cautionary tale. They're like, don't do business with a partner. Like, make sure that, it's a solo thing and you bring in other people as advisors or whatever else. And for us, I watched my husband and his best friend, build that insurance brokerage for 3 or 4 years prior. And and how even though they had differences, it was like, when one was in the pits, you had someone to pull you out. And the entrepreneurship game and building anything, there's just, you don't know what you don't know. And so you're going to hit points that are really frustrating. And to not have someone there to kind of pick you up, I can see how it would get just extremely lonely. And so I was going into it and I'm like, you know what? I need a partner. Like, I'm not going to do it by myself. And so we both went against everybody's advice, and we're so thankful that we did. And it sounds like you're kind of in the same boat where you're like, I didn't really know these guys, but they had what I needed and I had what they needed. And it's been beautiful ever since.
Oh, for sure. I mean, but it's partnerships are have their pros and cons for sure. It's you really so I tell people if you're getting into a partnership, you need to interview them, um, as if you're not interview them, but you need to get to know them as if you're marrying them because it's.
Yes.
I like to joke sometimes. It's like it's everything but the sex. it's,
Yeah.
it really is because you're going to be with these people all the time. You're going to talk with these people all the time, and you're going to you're going to need to collaborate and be on the same page. And when you have disagreements, you're going to have to be able to work that out and work through them. And it wasn't like that when our partnerships first started. It was really tough. The first year and a half, we didn't think we were going to make it because it's essentially like another analogy I give to is moving in with roommates. When your best friend, a lot of people moved in with their best friend after high school and went to college, and then they weren't best friends anymore after that first year of living together because you really get to know people, and sometimes personalities don't align. Sometimes they have quirks that you just can't get over. And so it is tricky. And so I always like to say too, like if you're doing a partnership, make sure you get an operating agreement and make sure you fill out an operating agreement as if you're getting a divorced, not as if you're getting married. And people are like, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, when you're first starting a business, everything's great. You're both excited. Everything's going to work out perfectly. You got all these projections. You're new to it. You're both green and it's all fun. But what happens when you're 6 months down the road and one partner spends money without telling the other partner? What happens when you're 10 months down the road and one partner wants to get out of a deal while the other one wants to keep it? Do you have all this ironed out? What happens when you get down 2 years down the road, that other partner gets married and starts paying less attention to the business? What happens when you're still putting in your 50% and they're not? All of these questions need answered when you're both happy.
Yeah.
And you need to iron this out in the operating agreement. So it's just like, okay, what happens if I don't do my end of the deal? And what happens if you don't do your end of the deal? While we're both happy, we're not arguing and everything's good, there's nothing awkward here. What would you want the quote unquote punishment to be or the consequence to be of that? Let's figure it out now. And I promise you, if you do it now and it's in writing, it's so much less awkward a year from now when that does happen and just say, hey, Sarah, I know we started this business together. We started this Airbnb together. But remember when we agreed that you would handle all the cleaners? Well, for the last 3 months, I've been handling finding the cleaners for the place and you haven't. And I've done it for a little bit. But I just need to say, like, that wasn't my end of the bargain. Do you mind doing it? Now, you'll either say, no, I'm not doing it anymore, and I'll take my consequence, whatever that is on the paper. Maybe that's 10%. Okay, well, then I get 60%, you get 40. Or you'll say, you know what, you're right. It's in writing right there. I should be doing my end of the bargain. It's so much easier and so much less awkward than there being no agreement. So I know that I kind of went on a tangent there, but I really like if you're getting into a partnership and that business is going to grow, an operating agreement with almost every consequence and every scenario you can think of ironed out. I highly recommend doing that.
Yes. Yeah, it's crucial. I mean, I think that you're right. Like at the beginning and you're looking at how amazing this could be, right? And you don't want to like ruin that energy at the beginning because having that conversation, even if you're happy when you're having it, that operating agreement and ironing it out and getting some clear definable roles down is an uncomfortable conversation no matter what. I mean, you have to talk about the things, a worst case scenario of things. And Emily and I went through that too. I mean, we watched, Ethan and Kenny go through it, and then we went through it, and they're just hard conversations. It's like for Emily and I, we were best friends in high school. We did live together all through college. We did move across the country together and live in Dallas together. And so we had gone through so many different steps to know that, we it could be like a marriage. Like I have seen every single side of this girl from day one. Like I know what I'm getting into. But still, when you start involving your money, all of a sudden that there is just more to worry about, right? It's your livelihood. So It's important to trudge through it, but yeah, I absolutely see how other people will like push away from that because they don't even want to enter into that conversation because it can get messy so quick.
I think it's Dave Ramsey said that the only ship that's guaranteed to sink is a partnership.
Honestly.
and
Yeah.
and But so there's some partnerships that do work out, but I mean, if you think of the biggest companies in the world, they're usually not partnerships. Google's one of the rare ones, but usually it's like you got really strong minds. Like you got Elon Musk, and you have Steve Jobs. You got people that would not do well with a partnership. They need controlling interest, and that's fine. But there's now that we just talked about a little bit of the cons or the precautions. There's a lot of pros too. If you
Mhm.
have a synchronized marriage in this partnership and one person brings what the other doesn't, that's what really, you don't want to have two butts in one seat. You want to have one butt in each seat. And what I mean by that is if the business needs multiple things going on, two people shouldn't partner if they're both just good at marketing. One needs to be good at sales and one should be good at marketing. Like you need to have, like, what are you bringing to this table? And it doesn't have to be exactly 50-50. That's a hard marriage to find, but it needs to be 40-60 or something like that. Like, what are you bringing to me that otherwise I'm not good at or couldn't do myself? Otherwise, why are we doubling down just on sales? We're both good at sales, but neither one of us can market. Well, what good is sales if we can't market, right? So, what does that person bring? And maybe
Yeah.
they have more time. Maybe you have money, and maybe they have time. Things like that. Maybe they have a better knowledge of real estate, but you have the connections for the financing. Like, make sure the partnership makes sense, and you're not doing it just because they're your friend or their family member or just because you like them. That's great. And if you want to do that, that's fine. But understand that if you're more passionate about it and have more skills and more assets and what's the other? There was one more word. But if you have more stuff than they do and you're just doing it for fun, you're probably going to do most of the work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, really understanding the value that your partners bring. Like, that's something that, for Emily and I, we always try to never lose sight of is it's like we're experts in totally different things, like polar opposite people, polar opposite ways our brain functions, which is so good in a lot of ways, right? She makes up for the things that I lack.
Perfect.
But really having an understanding of where they add value. So when you do feel like you're carrying more than 50%, because it's never going to be 50-50 all the time, just to be able to lean back on that and be like, look, no matter what, I could not do what the other partner is doing over here. Like, I need that person, whether it's them or someone else. Doesn't matter. I'm not going to do that. And so, for me and for Emily, I think that, both of us bring something to the table that the other could absolutely never bring to the table. And that's what keeps it at ease. It's like we
Yep.
absolutely need each other.
And let's be real, sometimes a certain percentage is worth more than
Hmm.
the other. Like, right? So maybe they do 30% of the effort that you put into it. So you're at 70, they're at 30, but their 30%, if you really iron it out, is probably the most valuable,
Hmm.
right? Like maybe they have the connections to find all the Airbnbs. Well, there is no business without that, right? So if they're going to do that and they're going to have that skill set and that knowledge and be able to talk with people to find all these great deals and we're getting them at a discounted rate, fair enough. I'll do the 70% because that probably is the more valuable of the two. And you just have to determine that, and you can't get greedy, right? You have to like understand that sometimes in a partnership you will get the heavier load. That's just how the skill set worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't get greedy. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Nothing magical and wonderful happens from a space of jealousy or greed. So
No.
I 1000% agree. All right. I've got another question for you. What is your overall opinions on Airbnb versus other real estate investment strategies? Like, kind of give me a general pros and cons to both.
Yeah. So my outlook on Airbnb is it's definitely here to stay. We're past that. We're past the. I think when it first started, people were like, nobody's going to let people live in their houses. This is crazy, and it's going to be dangerous, and people are going to steal stuff. And we got past that stage for the most part. I mean, that some of that stuff still goes on, but it's here to stay. It's a publicly traded company now, which is absolutely crazy. I actually invested in it, but my opinion on where Airbnb is going is that I think that it's going to become overly saturated, and I think there's a way to get around this. But I think it's going to happen. Airbnb prices are going up. That people are now seeing that hotels are now cheaper than Airbnb, And a lot of areas, because Airbnbs are being so inflated and such a hot commodity, especially in places like Gatlinburg and like Austin, Texas, these places where it's cool to stay in an Airbnb and people are paying more for that. But now hotels are, they're trying not to die. So they're battling back with lower prices. So I think what's going to happen is where there used to be one Airbnb in, let's give a random market. There used to be one Airbnb in Charleston, South Carolina. Now there's thousands of Airbnbs. And as the market gets flooded and flooded with more and more Airbnbs, prices will come down. Supply and demand. This is basic understanding. But what you do to offset that, in my opinion, and what I think Mike and Jill do a good job at, and you guys do a good job at, is your design and how nice you make the space. You make it a vacation within the vacation. And so now people see, okay, well, this place is $800 and this place is $800 too. Why would I stay at one over the other? They're going to pick yours, or they might even pay $50 or $100 more because you have a pool table, you have a cool theater room, you have a really nice design, and you have like a cool layout to your place. You have better pictures, things like that. And I think those places everything, all of them are going to come down at some point. The places that are getting $2,000 a night now are going to come down to probably $1,800 or $1,500 a night eventually. But some are going to drop to 1,000 because they don't have good pictures, they don't have good layout, they don't have good design, and they don't have a vacation within the vacation, I would call it. So the ones that do will continue to make really good income and really good cash flow. But I think the way you stand out is how nice you make your place and the thought and effort that you put into it.
Yeah.
Was that kind of what you're asking? Because that's my projection for Airbnb.
Yeah, no, that was a really good answer. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, we obviously have a ton of conversations every single week with design clients and people who are looking to get involved in Airbnb. And at first, like when we first started in Airbnb, I just didn't understand the impact. I mean, we got in Airbnb because of design. That was our pivot during COVID when I thought I was going to be scaling all of 2020 and all of a sudden COVID happens and I was planning on scaling in DFW and travel stops completely. And I'm like, oh no, like this is not going the way that I planned immediately. So design was a pivot and it was just something that we had talent in and we didn't understand the role that it was playing as Airbnb was progressing. And at first it was like, I saw Airbnb as like kind of a unicorn situation where I was like, well, we're going to try this location over here. And I have no idea how to even project how good it's going to do, right? I didn't even know how to do the math on it. I had no idea how to compare it to other properties. I just didn't know. And now looking back at, some of the hosts that we worked with that were experienced and could do the math and were very strategic about how they were, overall improving their real estate portfolio in Airbnb, their intent in adding design to it was to make it more sustainable over time so that they wouldn't put all this effort into a property and put minimal effort into the design. And then a year later, it's getting beat by all the competition. Now, when we have clients come to us and they're asking us about design, it is an exact formula. It's like there is no consistent overall price and what it's going to cost to design your property per square foot because the design is determined by your competition. Like, depending on what market you're in, we are going to look at your closest neighbors and we're going to say, hey, look, your closest neighbor has a putting green in the backyard. If you want these prices to be matching your competitor, you not only need a putting green, but you need something else to beat them on the amenity front so that you are better. Like, this
Yeah,
is
you need a 9-hole golf course, right?
yeah, honestly, you need a tree house in your backyard or a hot tub or like something to
Right,
like really put the nail in the coffin there and stake your claim and be like, look, I'm the best one on this block, not you.
right.
And so for us, that's kind of our strategy on making sure that the properties that we partner on are sustainable because that really is your only control factor. Like, you don't control the market, you don't control your competition, you don't control the housing prices, you don't control the travel draw. What you do control is the product that you're offering. And if you're not going to give your all to that product, then you're starting a half-assed business. And what's the point?
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how Airbnb shifts over time. But the level up in the competition, I hope I play a role in that.
Yeah, there you go.
Good answer. Okay, I've got another question for you. Where do you think this market in general, real estate market, not just Airbnb, is headed this year. I mean, just looking at, the government raising interest rates and prices being at an all-time high. What do you anticipate the market doing this year?
Yeah, so I think it's gonna people. It's not ever gonna be just a sudden stop. It'll taper off, and I think what's gonna happen as they keep raising the interest rates, loans are gonna be harder to get. Loans are gonna be more expensive. People don't understand when that interest rate jumps 2 points, your payment jumps a lot more than just than saying 2 points. It's a significant, and the more pricey the home, the harder it's going to be to afford it. So please understand that. Like I think that the market will still be hot, and especially in hot markets for the next 3 to 6, maybe 8 months. But I think we will see a tapering off. And I think larger, more expensive homes are going to feel it first. And then it will slowly work its way down to the rest. Now, if we go into a recession like they're predicting here, because of the interest rate hikes and because of the inverted yield curve and all that stuff, if we go into a recession, then we might see a pullback, a pretty big pullback over the next year or two. These are all predictions, though. Anybody telling you otherwise or any guarantees has no idea. COVID can come back. We have no idea what could happen over the next year or two. Actually, I just read the other day that I think Philadelphia masked up again, and I was like, oh my gosh, not again. Here we go again. And I was like, um, you know, if that happens again, I don't think we can withstand it. I think the market, both the real estate and the stock market, were too resilient over the last 2 years. I think they should have been. I think the market should have got hit more because of what was happening, the shutdowns and all that. But the government pumped so much money. People don't even understand how much money was pumped into the system. They pumped so much money in that not only did they taper off any decline in the markets, they inflated it. So
Mhm.
people, like especially the people that had money, and this is how it kind of works. If you have money, it's easier to make money. We're going out and being like, oh my God, you're going to give us interest rates at 2%. We're buying up all the real estate we can. So the market got tight or not saturated. It got low on inventory. The inventory went away, and people. This wasn't just from mom and pops buying houses. This was firms. This was institutions coming in and buying up tons of houses because they were getting interest rates at 2, 3, 4%, and they were getting loans renewed. We knew a guy that got his apartment building. It was like 200 units. They because of the EIDL, they were able to refinance that for 40 years at 3.5%. A 40-year mortgage at 3 point. They had it listed for sale. They were going to sell the units. No longer is it for sale, obviously. Their cash flow went through the roof because they got a 40-year mortgage locked in at a 3.5% interest rate. So that's what we've been seeing. All that stuff's going away. So what I would predict is over the next 6 to 8 months, maybe a year, um, larger houses are going to get hit first. More expensive markets are going to get hit in Airbnb because spending is going to tighten, and people probably won't stay at $1,500 places. They might drop their budget to $1,000 or $800 a night places, and so on and so forth. And then it will trickle down to eventually hitting middle and lower class people, where you will see tightening across the board. That's my long-winded projection. That could go completely opposite. I'm open to that because I understand the market, but I think you should always prepare for the worst case scenario and do your numbers based on conservative estimates all the time, no matter what. So even if lately you've been getting $50,000 over asking on all of your houses that you've been putting on the market as a flipper, we still do our projections on asking price.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, this is kind of a tangent as well, but I'm not super familiar with the fix and flip world. Will you give me like a rundown of pros and cons just generally as you get involved in fix and flipping? Because I see all the time, like, one of the most common comments that we get about Airbnb is they're like, oh, these housing prices are out of control. Like, what? They'll just make
Sorry,
every
somebody was
excuse.
on my porch right here, so I didn't mean to look away. I
No,
didn't know what
you're fine. And they'll be like, "No, I don't want to buy an Airbnb." And I'm like, "Look, this isn't a fix and flip game. This is a buy and hold game, and the market's gonna, vary consistently. And so it's not. It's most important that you get in earlier rather than later. But with a fix and flip game, you have to be very cognizant of the market. So, will you give me like a rundown of kind of your pros and cons when it comes to fixing and flipping?
Yeah, so there's three types of checks in the real estate world. You got wholesaling, which is a quick check. You got flipping, which is a big check, and you got holding or Airbnb short-term rentals, which is a forever check. So when you're getting started in this game, people get all tied up. Like, what should I do? What should I do? Any of them. They all make money, but any of them, and it depends on the deal. It always depends on the deal and the numbers, in the market of as well, like where you're buying the property. But it always depends on the deal, and there's no real wrong answer there. Don't get caught up on that. But in a perfect world, if you didn't need the big checks to get started or the quick checks to get started, you'd buy everything to hold. Everybody's If you ask anybody when they're 60 years old if they wish they had almost all the property they got rid of, flipped, sold, they probably want it back. Then some people, now there is a caveat. There's some people that at 60 they sell everything they have because they're completely fed up with the rentals and their tenants. Absolutely hate the game. So there's one more caveat: your personality. What do you like to deal with? Who do you like to deal with? And what type of tenants? A through F. What's your niche? But so flipping is essentially that. It's as long as you're doing it right, it's a big check. So it can help you when you're getting started. I tell most people to wholesale or flip when they're getting started and build up initial capital because this game is so much easier when you have money, even if that's just for a down payment or to show the bank you got some money in reserves to get loans. It's easier when you have money when you don't. That's life in general, okay? So that's what flipping is. Now we turn flipping into a business. We're not just mom and pop out here flipping one or two houses a year, which is fine. We have a bookkeeper, we have an in-house project manager, we have an in-house office manager. We have a whole system that we're not really flipping houses anymore. We're a money management firm. We do all this with private money. So we have about 15 or 20 investors that send us money. We buy these flips, we flip them, we pay them their interest or their percentage on the deal, and then we keep the rest. So we're essentially now a money management firm that flips houses. So the pros to flipping houses are, if you're doing it right, big checks. The con to flipping houses is the management of the contractors, the constant looking for deals, and the fact that you do not keep the property. So you don't get the depreciation, you don't get the rental income, you don't get the cash flow, you don't get appreciation. Okay, these are all deals. If you're doing it right, they're bought and sold within a year. So the con to that is all those properties are now gone. Do we wish we had, you were talking about almost 200 properties now. Are we going to wish we had at least some of those back in 10, 15 years? Sure. Sure, especially the ones that appreciate like crazy. But remember, hindsight's always 2020, right? But what you're doing now is for a reason, right? Maybe you're not in the position to hold the house. Maybe you're not in position to flip it. Maybe you're not in position to do Airbnbs. So don't be so hard on yourself as long as you're doing something.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of the fun part about real estate is that as you get further and further into it and as you come across different deals that make sense for different reasons, they're just more tools in your real estate toolbox. Like it becomes a lot easier to take a look at any given property and be able to assess what makes sense to do with this property. Every property has a different thing that's going to make sense for that property. So it's nice to be able to have that flexibility and kind of determine as you're presented with different deals.
100%. And somebody, as you get in this game, comparison is like the worst thing you can do. And we all are guilty of it. But somebody's always doing bigger, better, higher cash flow, better strategies than you. Always. No matter what you're doing, somebody's doing it bigger and better. And so don't worry about that. Are you doing better than what you were doing last year is the important question. And somebody always has something going on that you don't know about. While it all looks smooth on Instagram and on YouTube, I'm even guilty of this because that's what we put highlight reels up there. Although I do try to give the behind the scenes honesty to it, but somebody's always dealing with something or their strategy is bothering them in a way that you don't know about. So just keep that in mind that there is no like perfect way to go about this, that it's all smooth sailing and you have no worries. In fact, private money lending that I do, I would argue that it's the most passive way to get into real estate. I literally wire money and the money comes back. Okay.
Mhm.
And if you do it right in the right markets, you can make 30, 40, 50% returns on your money. Okay. There is risk involved. You need to understand it. If you want to do another live with me, I can teach your people how to do private money investing because I love that strategy. But sometimes somebody doesn't pay,
Yeah.
right? And now what do you do? I have not had this experience where I've not recouped my money, but I've had it where I've gone a week without communication and I get nervous. So there's always something with every strategy, no matter how perfect or how smooth it seems, that person is dealing with issues within that strategy. So I just try to tell people this and let them. Instagram and YouTube portrays perfection, and that's just not always the case.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and what's also semi irritating. Like for example, on TikTok, I'm the same way. I'm like, look, you have to show the good and you have to show the bad, but you only have 3 minutes to show it, right? So you're either showing the good or the bad. So you're releasing all these videos talking about nightmare scenarios and struggles and obstacles that you have to overcome, and they'll get like 4 views. And then you'll like glorify the money that you're making. You'll show, even though we're going through these struggles, this is the end result and this is why we do it. And that'll go viral and everyone will be like, I feel like I'm giving like a false sense of hope to everyone because they're only consuming the good and they're not consuming the bad. And I'm like,
Well,
oh
people only
no.
want results. People want results. They don't want the work. That's just in general. And so that's why that is. That like my Instagram, I'm at like 11,000 followers. My YouTube, I'm almost at 50,000. I don't really. I had a TikTok for a minute, but I had too much to manage. But if I went out tomorrow, and I could do this, if I went out tomorrow and bought a Ferrari, I could grow all those accounts by 100, 200, 300,000 subscribers. Just showing my Ferrari over and over again, holding money up, showing the checks, but I would feel weird. That's not me. That's not my style. Now, maybe one day I will have a nice car because I do like cars, but to do that in order to gain a following is weird for me. But people love results. And so, yes, that's not a fault of your own. That's if you're making content, you got to put your highlights out there because that's what people want to see and that's how you grow the following. But what I say is just make sure you counterbalance it. So maybe if your Instagram post or perfection, make sure you're telling the people that follow you on your stories some of the bad stuff that's going on behind the scene, things, deals aren't working out, tenants that are squatting, so on and so forth. So I think that that's the best way you can balance it.
Yeah, definitely the perfection videos are kind of the hook, and then the backside of things is kind of where you cultivate that relationship and
Right.
show them both sides. So as far as when you fix and flip, you're talking about how you have investors who send you money and you deploy that by fixing and flipping properties, and it sounds like that's exactly what we're doing with Superhost Labs, but with Airbnbs, right? Where we're pooling money from investors, deploying it into Airbnbs, and then they have a payout. Um, the struggle that we're kind of running into is, we have a following on TikTok, and we've got a lot of people within Superhost Labs that have followings on Twitter, on YouTube, on TikTok, on Instagram, kind of all over the board. But the followings that we have on social media are largely non-accredited people. It's like it's much more difficult to find investors who are ready to hop on board with you and invest with you. So that's something that we're kind of experiencing as we grow this, is that like it really doesn't matter how much of a platform you have on social media. It's the quality of people that you have following you, or attracting the right crowd. And so I feel like
Yes.
that's kind of a shift that we're going through. So do you have any advice on that? Like, seeing that you work with investors and you do have a big social media following, how did you kind of start targeting the right people and cultivating the right community of the people that you wanted to do business with?
So the way we do it, so we don't we do one investor per house. So we're not SEC regulated. We don't have to be because we keep the money separated. We don't pull it, and so we also don't have to have accredited investors. We're not allowed to advertise for money though. So we're not allowed to market, hey, we need to raise money, we're looking for deal. We're not allowed to do that per SEC regulations. So here's the trick. Don't just show your properties and show your Airbnb. Show the returns that your investors are getting. So do a whole TikTok on, oh, this property worked out great and we're so happy for our investors. The average investor put in so and so on this and it got an average return. Remember, you can't guarantee things, you got to be careful, but got an average return of 15% on their money on this one, when money's sitting in a bank account's making 1 to 2% if you're lucky. So things like that attracts, and I got really good at that in my before and after walkthrough videos. And sometimes now I private money invest as well. So I would talk about the returns that I get. And naturally, that attracted people to say, well, wait a minute, I want to do that. I've got 100,000 sitting around, or I've got 150,000 in an IRA, or I've even had people, I've got $2 million from selling my family's fortune to invest, and I don't know what to do with it. And I trust you because I see you all the time. Can you put my money to work? So through Instagram and YouTube, I've raised almost $10 million in committed funds doing that. So I think it's not what are you doing, but what could you do for them? Okay.
Right.
And remember, yes, a TikTok and an Instagram audience is going to be hard to find accredited investors on. So if you're pooling money, it is going to be harder for you. So what I would say is don't just focus on the pooling money, because it's also hard to deal with a bunch of $5,000, $100 investors versus, 100, 200,000. And that's no offense to anybody listening. We're not trying to not trying to steer away
Raise the
from that.
barrier of entry.
Yeah, well, we're not trying to raise the bars for entry, but there's things out there like Fundrise and stuff for people like with $100. So do get started in that. But if you're trying, I'm talking to you as an investor. Try to find people that can do the whole deal,
Yeah.
because they're out there. And that's actually easier on your end. It's a whole lot less money management. You open one account, you put their money in it, you fund the deal, you give them their return, and move on down the road. So I would just say, talk about the returns and mention IRAs. People have a lot of money sitting in IRAs and how they can self-direct that into the things that you're doing.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. And that was a big conversation that we had on the backside of Superhost Labs is, we're coming into this space and people like Fundrise exist. And, we've applied for our Reg A and, we have to invite the SEC to our dinner table for a while before we get approval for that. But even when we get that, the bar of the $25,000 minimum will not be lowered just because we do want to be dealing with mature or experienced investors who are sure about this investment and who are not going to be knocking on our door every single day with, desperate eyes being like, where is this money? How is it coming in? We don't want to create that frenzy because in the back end, it's a logistical nightmare.
Right, right. And that's good that you have, I'm glad that you have a minimum, because I think that for you and your business and the scale that you're at currently, it's going to be easier for you. Now, if you got money to deploy in 1,000 different directions, it makes more sense to raise 100, $500, 5,000 like Fundrise does. They have, millions of investments out there. Well, I don't know about millions, but hundreds of thousands for sure. So it's easier to deploy a dollar. For
Right.
us, we're doing 40 deals a year. It's kind of harder to find a place for every dollar that comes in if you're raising it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for us, I mean, we would like to get into it more of a niche category of quality over quantity, right? Like that's always been my game is, I want to be, of course, bringing in the money is great and how it impacts your lifestyle is great. But at the end of the day, to like change the way people travel and offer them a unique memory, like something that they're going to remember for the rest of their life. And to, see these spaces and see how it's improving people's lives and improving the travel space in general, I think is kind of a little twist on our direction in comparison to companies like Fundrise. So we're excited to see where it goes. I mean, it's kind of sky's the limit, and we're at the beginning, and we're like, it could go a million different ways, but we have high hopes.
Absolutely.
So
You guys go to local meetups, local real estate meetups?
we haven't started that yet. I mean, we're still at the beginning phases of really like defining people's roles and figuring out exactly what our direction is and how we're scaling, and so I think that that'll come a little bit further
Yeah,
down the
that's where
road.
you can find money. That's where there's money to be made at these meetings, and that we figured that out too. And especially if you're in the Dallas market.
We're all over all the time. So currently I'm in
Okay.
Dallas. Been here for a month.
Okay. So we already know Dallas has a ton of money. Go to their real estate meetups and ask to do a presentation, and you will raise money. You will absolutely, if you talk about the returns and show some of your product, show that you have a TikTok following, you will raise money. So again, you can't go in there to raise money until you have your regulation certificate, but you can go in there and generally talk about the returns that their investors are getting, and money will raise their hands.
Yeah.
Okay, just that's another way you could raise it. Sorry, I didn't mean to get this into that. This is my niche, private money and raising private money. So that I really like. I can talk about it for days.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, that was a really interesting lesson that I feel like I learned when I moved to Fort Worth. So I started in Dallas, moved to Fort Worth, and there was a day where I was getting my nails done and I was shopping, and my husband calls me and he's like, "Hey, Sarah," he's like, "I met a guy downtown Fort Worth who invited me up for a drink at the Petroleum Club." He was like, "And now I'm, 40 stories up in this building in downtown Fort Worth, and I want you to come. I think you'd enjoy the environment." And I was anticipating like a very snooty, like I had been to the Petroleum Club in Midland, Texas, like in the, petroleum patch, like Permian Basin. And I walked into that Petroleum Club and I was like, no, this is not my space. Like, this is not my scene. And so that's what I was anticipating coming to a Fort Worth Petroleum Club. It's just like walking into a very stuffy environment. And I couldn't have been more wrong. Like when I went up and we had drinks that night, we met a bunch of people in that club. And before the end of the evening, we had signed up to be junior members and we started going to that club almost exclusively. Like we just set down the bar scene everywhere else and we would just go to the petroleum club.
That's
And
awesome.
immediately, I mean, Ethan and I both just like didn't know what to anticipate. And it was just when I started designing Airbnbs, and immediately that exploded our design business. I mean, just the
There you
people
go.
up there were like, oh, you're involved in Airbnb, you have some experience. Like, I would like to get involved. Let me hire you. And it was so simple just by being in that environment, even though I didn't have a ton of experience and I wasn't the best in the market, just being able to rub shoulders with those people, they were so willing to like, reach out for help to grow something that they don't have time to do because they don't have time to do it. They need someone to do it for
That's exactly why my wife and I are going to do a deal with you guys because we don't have the
them.
time either.
Yeah, right. Right. You got to pick your niche and then outsource the rest. So I couldn't
Yep.
agree more. Well,
Yeah, but
I
we seriously we need to talk sometime because I wanted to get on here and this was kind of like an introduction too because we've never really met each other. So
yeah,
I like the way you think. I like the way y'all are going, and so I'd like to see if something would work out between us to see if we can put some money with you guys.
absolutely. Well, we wouldn't complain about that. I've got one last question for you here and then we'll wrap up. Last question I've got is, what are your personal goals as you continue building your real estate portfolio? What is your end game?
Yeah, so now like you said it earlier, quality over quantity. So when I was in my 20s, I wanted to build an empire. I wanted to be Grant Cardone. I wanted to have it all. And then as I got a little bit older and traveled more, and now with my daughter and stuff, and even before that, that's not my personality. It's not who I am. I would be hectic all the time. I would feel overwhelmed. I'd feel like I constantly need to make content and all these things. And I don't want that. I want to be able, while I don't enjoy the off button for very long, I want to have the option to push it. And I feel like Gary Vee, Grant Cardone, these people don't have the option to push that button anymore. And I never want to be that. I want to have the time available to spend with my wife if we want to hang out and watch Netflix one night. I want to be able to be at every game or every practice that my daughter goes to as she's growing up. I never want to miss anything that she does. She's growing up so fast as is. So what we're trying to do now is we had a really good year income wise last year, best we've ever had, and it was pros and cons. We had a tax bill to show for that, but we realized that we were really busy. We were super busy, and we probably didn't need 70% of that income. To be honest with you, we probably didn't need it. We just got fixated on we're doing well and let's keep building and keep growing. And now this year we're reevaluating and saying, okay, what can we cut back on? That will take a hit to our income, but that's fine because what are we ultimately doing? We're buying our time back. So everything we do now is with the intention or the purpose to buy us more time. So if something makes us 50, if there's an investment out there that makes us $100,000 a year, but it's going to take us 10, 15 hours a week, we don't want it. We would rather take the $50,000 a year income that maybe takes an hour a week, right? So we're contemplating our time with every move. And this is something we weren't good at for a long time. We run 2 YouTube channels right now. We have a group that we coach twice a month. She works up until recently, up until next week, she's worked full time as a nurse anesthetist. I run A&M Investments with my partners full time. We had a CrossFit gym that we owned. We had things in every direction. So we're trying to scale back. I've backed out of some businesses. I've left some partnerships. And so goals for me and my wife are to travel as much as possible and be present with each other and our daughter as much as possible. And so every investment will take that into consideration.
Yeah.
That was
Music
kind of
to
long,
my
but I almost have to hear it myself to make sure I stick to it.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's so easy to get caught up in it. I mean, like it just is. It's like the second you figure out how to make money, it's like something unlocks in your brain and you're like, "Oh my gosh, now it's at my disposal," right? Like I understand generally how to make money come, how to make money go. Like let's see how fast we can grow this. And I think that that's kind of that wheel that people get stuck in. And I could not be more opposite of that. Like I love what I do. I love real estate. I love being involved in it. I love Airbnb. This is where I want to be. Like this is where I'm passionate. But in general, I'm like, look, I'm probably going to be taking off at least 4 months in total a year. Like I don't care
Right.
if I'm
At
not
your
the
own, be busy at your own pace. I think
yeah.
that's what I want, the option to be busy. I don't want to have to be busy. I want the
Yeah.
option to be retired for a few months. I don't want to have to be retired for a few months. So it's really a balance there, and it's about personality. There are people out there that could retire at 25 and be perfectly okay with it. Their brain operates differently. Good for them.
Mhm.
I tell people like that I've met or said that, John, you were retired, you're crazy for working again. I say to them, I sometimes wish I had that ability to slow this brain down, but I don't.
Yeah, not yet at least, right? It's not today.
Right.
Maybe it's a
Yeah.
tomorrow thing, but it's not a today thing. But
Right.
yeah, and also, I mean, as long as you've got that pause button, everything that pours from you is healthier because of it, right? It's like it seems counterintuitive. I mean, especially for women, we're always like, let's put everyone else first. Like, we'll put ourselves on the back burner and let's put everyone else first. And in turn, it's like, no, the more you prioritize yourself and your family and your mental health and everything else that pours from you that's work related is so much higher quality. It's coming from a place of peace. Like, just the quality and the overall end result is better because you're operating out of a corner of happiness instead of a corner of desperation or chaos.
100% agree. And I heard I was an older guy. He was in his 60s. He had thousands of rental properties and all that. And this kind of hit home for me. He said that once you reach a certain base of income and passive income and stability in your life, happiness, and they've done studies on this, happiness only grows by so much after that. So after that, you're really just trading, you can just continue to trade your time for money. But nobody at the age of 60, if you did relatively well for yourself, looks back and goes, I wish I just had one more property. I wish I had just two more Airbnbs. I wish I would. No, they always say, I wish I would have spent more time with so and so. I wish I would have went to more of my daughter's games. I wish I would have did more family vacations. I wish I would have traveled to more countries. This is across the board in retirement homes. They've done plenty of studies on it. This is usually the case of regret. And so I always have a conversation. Anytime I'm purchasing something or investing in something, I have the conversation with my 60-year-old self. It's intuitive to me now. And I say, okay, well, the 60-year-old self doesn't always have to be right, and my current self doesn't always have to be right, but they both need to be included in the conversation.
Yeah.
They both need to have a say. So if right now I want to go out and buy 10 Lamborghinis, my current self would be, that's awesome. Let's do that. Sounds like so much fun. But my 60-year-old self might be like, well, wait a minute. Instead of doing that, why don't you set up the next 30 years of your life for to never have to work again,
Right.
right? And then maybe we meet somewhere in the middle, right? And so that always have that conversation with your older self. And two, on like, okay, I'm not going to take that vacation this year because I'm going to grind it out. I'm not going to spend that time with my family because I can make an extra 20 grand this year. Make sure your 60-year-old self gets to chime in and say, well, wait a minute. You're fine financially this year. You've already made more than you made last year. You don't need another 15 grand. Go be with your family.
Yeah.
Go have that time with your family. And in that scenario, the 60-year-old self is probably right. So just that's a kind of a weird thing I do, but it might work for somebody else, but always have that conversation.
Yeah, 1000%. Yeah, don't lose your life trying to make one.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I love that quote. Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me on here today. This was a really good conversation. I'm feeling all sorts of inspired walking into the rest of my day.
Good, good. Well, I'm glad you had me on, and I'll get my wife. We'll get some times together. I'd love to sit down with you and your partner and see if we can't partner on an Airbnb or two.
Yeah, absolutely. We would love that. Well, before
Yeah.
we get off here, go ahead and plug all of your social channels so people know where to find you, and we'll include it in the bio of our YouTube video here.
I appreciate it. You can find me on YouTube at my name, Jon Schoeller, Jon, no H. And then you can find me on Instagram, The Frugal Investor. And then also follow my wife's channel because we're trying to grow that. It's just my last name is the Schoeller family. We're about to hit 100,000 subscribers on there. And it's just me and my family and our travels and raising our daughter.
Fun, the good stuff.
Yes.
Beautiful. Well, and for our listeners as well, if you're looking for us, you can find us at superhostlabs.com. You can find us on any social media platform at the Carwells or at Superhostlabs. And if you're watching this, you're already watching our YouTube channel. So thank you. Well, thank you so much, Jon. You definitely dropped a bunch of gems on here. I'm sure it's going to be super valuable for our listeners. It was super valuable for me. And we'll catch you next time.
No problem. Next time I'll do the live like this.
Yeah, for our listeners or our viewers who are watching this while I'm recording it, I'm sideways, so he's watching me horizontal
If you
instead of
turn
vertical.
if you turn your iPad, it won't move with.
Watch. This is what it does. So this is, and then it just goes right back to sideways.
What the heck?
I don't know. And this,
That's
like, this
crazy.
way is where it sits straight up and down. And I cannot, I sat there for like 10 minutes, like flipping it, and it just,
Oh, you know what you probably have to figure out is lock your screen or something. I don't know. That's really strange. But anyway, it was a great conversation. Send me some dates you have available in the coming weeks with your partner, and I'd love to sit down and chat.
beautiful. I will do so. Absolutely. I'll
Thank
follow
you.
up with you right after this.
Sounds good.
All right. Have a good day.
All right, real quick before you go,
Okay.
my uploading in the top right corner only says 99%. Does that matter?
Ooh, here. Let me stop the recording.